Welcome to the third in our arc of plenaries for this annual meeting. We have acknowledged the messiness of past gifts. We've explored some of the contemporary challenges. And in this session, we are going to imagine future approaches. I have dropped into the chat a reminder about our agreements or covenants with one another in how we participate in the session. I'll drop those in again in a few minutes. But I just want to give you a sense of the arc of the session tonight before I turn things over to Kimbol. This is the brief introduction to the session, which will be followed by a seed presentation and experience by Kimbol. And then we will move into breakout groups with a couple of prompts to get our conversations flowing. And then return to plenary for reflections that will include a guided meditation or guided reflection and some sharing of that experience before we wrap up. So without further ado, I invite Kimbol to get us going.
Great. Thank you, Karen Marie. I am Kimbol Soques. I wish you good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night. Not in the go to sleep sense, please. I am delighted to be with you today. I am a PhD student at Garrett-Evangelical. I've just finished up my exams period. And today, what I'd like to share with you actually came from my work in progress proposal. So this is very much still a work in progress. And I hope you enjoy and are get curious about what it is that I've got to share. All right. So in the original invitation, part of the invitation was, what if we were imagining what enlivening forms of religious education might look like in the future, or I would say in the moment? And what I am here to share with you today is reading poems theologically as a liberating framework. So for my portion, the little agenda is I'll spend a little time telling you what is this reading poems theologically, and then we'll try it. And then I'll talk a little bit about the more scholarly things I'm thinking about while I'm preparing these and while I get ready to do my dissertation. And then we will go back to our dreams together, as Karen Marie described. So let me go back. That's not the one I want. I want this. So reading poems theologically is, as you might anticipate, about reading poems. The process is adapted from Lectio Divina and close reading, both the scriptural practice of tuning one's ear to the divine, as well as the more secular practice common in particularly higher ed poetry classrooms of paying very careful attention to the text, what it's saying to you and what it might be saying to itself. When I do this sort of work with groups, I offer 2 or 3 poems that I've chosen in advance for each session that we gather. Part of what I invite our folks to do is to spend some time engaging with the poems on their own, spending a little time getting to know the poems, doing this sort of reflective work on their own. And then we come together as a group, and then we bring what we've found on our own together to see what happens when we get there. So when I share the poems with the participants in advance, I encourage them to take some notes, as I will you. And the full set of questions I ask them to reflect on as they read the poems, I hope multiple times, is one question is, what emotions does this work evoke? What thoughts and ideas? A classic close reading question. What does this work seem to me to be saying about or to God or the divine? I operate in a Christian context, so I usually say God for myself. And then I invite them to think a little harder and further. How am I encountering the divine in this work, my own self? And finally, what am I taking away about the divine and faith from my time with this poem? Or how do I see and connect with the divine through this poem? So that's all, I hope, what they do in advance. As homework is, particularly with congregations and lay groups, it's a mix. But as a group, we come together and we read the poem again together. We read it through twice, once in quiet reflection and once preparing to talk with each other. And then when we talk with each other, we share insights for whatever we discovered in advance or discovered in the moment. I do try to touch on the first couple of questions, but I try to lead people into the encounter and connection questions as much as I can. And we do this for each poem. So this is we do first poem, second poem, if we have time, third poem. And then if we can, I invite the group to think about the poems, feel about the poems as a unit, as what are the poems doing in connection with each other that might be a little different than they do on their own? How is the divine reaching us in this particular confluence of influences? So, and as I mentioned here, I try really hard to encourage participants to do the pre-work because it really does enhance the collective work. But it is the kind of practice that we can grow and learn together, even if there's not a good chance for everyone to spend a little time with the poems in advance. So we're going to do a small form of this. I'm going to read the poem I've chosen aloud. I'll have it up on screen so that you'll be able to read it as well. As you listen to me read and perhaps read along, notice what strikes you and notice, what does this say to you about or to the divine? And I'll read it a second time. I'll pause for a little bit. I'll read it a second time. And Jen will drop in the chat a link to a Padlet board. This is not the same as the announcements board. This is a separate board. And there is where I'm hoping that you'll feel free to add an insight to that board rather than trying to do an open forum in this context, because as we're all very well familiar, that becomes really complicated in this type of venue. Drop it in the Padlet and please look at each other's insights so we get a little flavor of this communal reading together. So with that discussed, let's read How to Paint a Promise in January by Lucy Shaw for Lauren. Here in my winter breakfast room, the colors of rainbows are reduced to 8 solid lozenges in a white metal tray. A child's brush muddies them to gray in a glass of water. Even the light breaks down as it pushes through the rain-streaked windows and polishes the wooden table imperfectly. Green leaves always turn brown. Summer died into the dark days a long time ago. It is hard even to remember what it was like, stalled as I am in this narrow slot of time and daylight. Until I look down again and see, puddling along the paper, under a painted orange sun, primitive as the first spoked wheel, the ribbon of color flowing out of my granddaughter's memory. A new rainbow, arcing wet over strokes of grass, green enough to be true. How to Paint a Promise in January for Lauren. Here in my winter breakfast room, the colors of rainbows are reduced to 8 solid lozenges in a white metal tray. A child's brush muddies them to gray in a glass of water. Even the light breaks down as it pushes through the rain-streaked windows and polishes the wooden table imperfectly. Green leaves always turn brown. Summer died into the dark days a long time ago. It is hard even to remember what it was like, stalled as I am in this narrow slot of time and daylight. Until I look down again and see, puddling along the paper, under a painted orange sun, primitive as the first spoked wheel, the ribbon of color flowing out of my granddaughter's memory, a new rainbow, arcing wet over strokes of grass, green enough to be true. So I hope you'll take a little time now, perhaps as we go along, and add your thoughts to that Padlet, because one of the things that makes this a practice worth doing in community is being able not only to engage with the text as an individual, but to be able to engage with the text as a community. We find each other's insights. We start to find things that we didn't realize or didn't find when we are by ourselves, which is, I believe, an experience that we are accustomed to when we're engaging with our holy texts, when we come together in community to study them, to read them, to discuss them. But we can also do something like that here. So why I'm looking at reading poems theologically is that one of the ways is that, or one of the things that's going on is that we have multiple ways of knowing the divine, and we tend to under practice the things that are not school-based, that are not prose text, that are not more rationally oriented. My tradition is U.S. Reformed Presbyterian, and we are long known to be an extremely heady people and struggle getting from the head down to the rest of the heart and the body. And because the poems use both the head and the heart, and to some extent the body, I think they make an exciting vehicle for this kind of work. In addition, I find that faithful imagination and wonder are under-practiced in our religious educating. We are imagining all sorts of things all the time. One of the books that I found really interesting earlier in my coursework was James K.A. Smith's discussion of the liturgies of the marketplace. So imagination is being formed all the time, but I don't know how much we are overtly helping form imaginations in our worship spaces, in our RE classrooms. And I think that's an opportunity that we should be taking, that matters very much to the folk that we work with as well as to ourselves. Another challenge, and why I talk about this as a liberatory pedagogy, is that community, congregational religious ed, so with faith communities, tend to use schooling methods, intellection and listening, reception, absorption, over knowledge construction. And I see that using emancipatory pedagogy could provide these structured opportunities for agency, for practicing imagination, for practicing wonder, rather than trying to hope, let it happen, come by happenstance, and just sort of show up. I myself believe that if it's something that matters to us, it's something that we need to pay attention to, and we need to provide opportunity, formal opportunity for. So some of the ways that, as I do my studies, I've been engaging with emancipatory pedagogy is the ways emancipatory pedagogy engages with imagination and uses imagination. So it's essential for poems. They don't work if you're not imagining. So by using poems, I'm already generating a site where we're going to be imagining. When I go into my forebears in emancipatory pedagogy, I find like Anthony and Darder talking about trying to create opportunities to insert students into new and unfamiliar contexts, which is an imaginative opportunity if as well as perhaps a physical opportunity. Paulo Freire's pedagogy of hope is an imaginative practice where it does not bend to the status quo, but reaches for other possibilities and other opportunities. And for example, bell hooks says that which we cannot imagine, we cannot bring into being. So offering opportunities to engage imagination in shaped and structured ways that connects with the divine, I believe gives our folk an opportunity to build those muscles and build those habits in ways that they could potentially deploy later on. Imagination gives us practice in borrowing, in trying on, in tailoring these ideas or images or possible ways of being. I also find it interesting that poems are, in some sense, bodily experience adjacent. They rely heavily on sensation by proxy. You're not actually feeling it in the physical space that the poet was, but the poet is trying to get you there anyway through the words. And I think for emancipatory pedagogy, this ties into the emphasis on specificity of decoding the world, as Freire would say, or Darder's lovely detailed pedagogy of the body that she offers. One of the things that emancipatory, I think, pedagogy does, I think, very well is that it refuses the split that banking models of education often deploy. Emancipatory pedagogy is interested in and emphasizes the wholeness of the person, intellect, feeling, and embodied space. And the third major area I see in emancipatory pedagogy that works beautifully with this reading poems theologically is its emphasis on relationships, on subject-subject interaction, on bringing your vulnerability to the group of learners, wherever your position, your social position is with that group of learners, and its emphasis on group sense-making. So the making sense of a poem on your own is also between the writer and the work, you the reader and the work. And so to some extent, a relationship between the writer and the reader. But then with this practice done in community, we bring that sense making together, and we're able to use what Parker Palmer calls a consensual process of truth seeking. So our understandings of what we've experienced can be informed and nuanced with each other's experiences. And I think this gives us an opportunity to balance any tendencies to solipsism that we might have when we're reading poems on our own. So, as you might gather at this point, I see emancipatory pedagogy as essential for this practice of reading poems theologically. It's not only the richness that I think it offers, it's also that, certainly in a US context, people's experience with poems tends to be schooling oriented, very top down, very closed interpretation, which is against pretty much all the poems I know, but it does tend to be how it's taught, unfortunately. In addition, I find the folk that I'm working with, their personal experience in theologizing and trusting their own theological understandings, it's been limited. They've either been trained or have a practice of deferring to experts or as in clerics or instructors, and their own agency has not been affirmed. So they often feel in both respects disempowered and self-distrusting. And emancipatory pedagogy is designed to empower and to offer agency and increase self-trust. So the goals of this practice of reading poems theologically is imaginative engagement with the divine, first and foremost, but also very much to practice theologizing as a common human activity. Theologizing is something that we all do, whether we get paid for it or rewarded for it or recognized for it. And then my scholarly goal is to more thoroughly engage what's happening theologically and theopoetically as people are having this experience with poems and with each other. So I see emancipatory pedagogy and reading poems theologically as offering opportunities to practice faithful imagination, creating fluidity and the ability to expand one's own notions and one's community's notions of the divine and how the divine is active. And returning to that initial question that got me started on making this work in progress proposal, imagining what enlivening forms of religious education might look like in the future, I deeply feel that it's hard to enact what you haven't already experienced. And I hope as a emerging scholar and religious educator that I will be able to help offer many more opportunities for folk to practice faithful imagination so that they can gain greater grace and comfort as they take that kind of imagination out into the places that where they are working and having fun and being together in the world. Thank you.
We have a few minutes before we need to move into breakout groups in the next place for our flows. So I'm going to open the floor if there are any questions of clarification or comments that you might want to make to what Kimbol's presented before we then begin our conversation in small groups.
Kimball, this is so exciting. I would love to take a class of yours. It is just recently. I'm so grateful for the experience of being with the Horizon series and REA because I was able to find an editor who did theopoetics. I never heard of that. I mean I know that I am theological and I'm spiritual, and I thought I would just bring that into that. I didn't actually know that was a discipline. And I did not know that there was a way for this kind of imagination and and structure to be considered scholarly.
Mm.
So I'm very fascinated with it, and I would really love to talk to you more because that is my vein, and I am just starting as a result of the process with the fellowship, trusting my voice and my ability to reflect and be critical with poetry. And so
Mhm.
I'm just seeing this, something in me just wants to, I just want to cry because it's so affirming. So I would like to just continue to follow you and see where this goes.
Please do. Let's talk. Let's get
Okay,
together later.
thank you.
Hello, Karen. I was wondering, this uh, poem is not everybody that has. By the way, my name is Father Remigius. I don't know what is showing there. Might be showing my mother's name. So, Regina, is I don't know how that got there, but it's just in case you're wondering. So I know that poetry is not an easy reach for most people, including myself. And reading poem theologically sounds to me like um, uh, this is an insular group. The poetic language sounds insular to me. I love poems, but I can't write any poems. So, so if this is going to be a special area, I don't know, and it's going to be emancipatory. I don't know how this might start with people like me who cannot read or write poems in order to be able to enjoy um, this kind of forum that sounded to me like a book club, or you might call that, that people settled this poem and see what the spirit might be telling them. Um, I don't know if I'm making sense. How do you demystify poetry for?
Right. That is an important question, and members of my committee have been pushing me with this to explore this. So that will be some of the work that is in progress. But I think for demystifying poetry is actually very important to me, Father Remigius. I think that you said you mentioned that you enjoy reading poems sometimes. And that for me is the place where we begin, not worrying about whether or not we feel able to make our own artworks, but to read the poem and find where we are in connection with the poem that's there. Um, one When I've done this with groups in the past, I try to have a mix of poems so their tones shift. Some feel easier to listen to than others. Some have, more high, what they call higher diction, but I don't try to use those words when we're talking. We're talking about the divine and our experience with the divine. And I encourage our participants that if we encounter a poem, the poem that we look at together, and someone is like, I got nothing. This doesn't talk to me. I don't even know what we're doing here. And I go, okay, well, then this is not the poem where you're connecting with the divine, is it? This is not yours. But I agree there's a strong issue around selecting the poems, the person who's the facilitator choosing poems, and even where one possibility I'm hoping to explore is for groups that struggle with literacy moving to poems that have already been memorized or were originally made for speech and not for the page. Because we've been doing poems, as far as I can tell, we've been doing poems as long as we've been humans talking to each other. So I think that too could be an opportunity for demystifying and for reducing that perceived elitist barrier that I agree is what unfortunately greets most people when you say poem. So thank you.
We have time for one more question or comment if someone would like to jump in.
I would like to ask a question. Listening to your presentation of your paper, it made me think of some kind of form of Lectio Divina, or can we call this like a poetic Lectio Divina, or maybe there could be another form of that. Do you find any connections in your work with this kind of form of spiritual practice?
Absolutely. The practice of Lectio Divina is part of what has informed my whole approach and development, particularly in the very in the earliest inklings of this work for myself. I started with the poem and what I had learned when I was doing my English degree, and I quickly realized that that was not helpful in any way, shape, or form. And when I turned my attention to the practices of Lectio Divina and started adapting it for not texts that are not sacred, there we go. That became a lot more fruitful for me. So yeah, I am deeply indebted to Lectio Divina, but I also want to recognize and affirm that these are expressions from other mortals to other mortals. There's not, other than from my tradition, I would say the work of the Holy Spirit or the breath of the divine more generally. There's not an overt holiness necessarily to the poems that we engage, but I still believe that there is that opportunity to engage theologically that we can explore. And I see Paul Van Straten talking about the Book of Nature tradition in Christian theology and mysticism. Yes, I was delighted to do a THM year at Boston College and learned quite a bit about my Catholic siblings' approaches with those less textual or ways of engaging divine inspiration. So it was really helpful. Mm-hmm.
So we're going to move into some breakout groups now. And I'm putting in the chat a couple of prompts that will invite you to engage as you gather in smaller groups. One of them is, how do you think the field of religious education needs to change to better address future needs? And secondly, how does your work anticipate future religious education needs? We've heard how Kimbol is trying to do that in the work that she's doing. How is your work doing that? So I will launch these groups and encourage you to take the next about 20 minutes to talk with those in your breakout.
Kimball, I am so thrilled that we read a Lucy Shaw poem. I love her, and I've met her a couple of times. She's an alum from the school I used to be the book buyer for.
Oh.
And so we hosted her for a couple of book signings and readings. And She's a delightful lady, or was a delightful lady. I
I'll
think
say her
passed.
memory is definitely a blessing. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I remember when she came for her book signing, we couldn't afford to like pay her to bring her in. We just asked if since she had a reunion that weekend, if she was willing to come. And I found out that she, by herself, drove across the country because she was living in the Pacific Northwest, I think, at
Right.
the time. She drove across the country to Chicago and she camped out along the way, just like pitched a tent and camped.
That sounds so like Lucy. I did not know her directly that well. But I've been involved with Glenn Workshop, so the image crew, and she was intimately involved there, and I think one of their chief cheerleaders and sponsors. And so I have close friends through that network who are extremely close to Lucy. It seems to me like anybody who was in direct contact with her, just you say Lucy Shaw and they just light up.
Oh,
Like,
I'm
yeah.
lighting up right now
Yep.
because she
She's
was just a great person.
such a great person and such a trip. So not like any of the possible stereotypes you could have about someone of her station or context or any of it. Yeah,
Mhm.
this is really
Yep.
cool. So,
Indeed.
oof. I take my deep breath.
That was so great, Kimball. So good.
Good.
Yeah,
Good,
really
good,
well
good.
done.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the query about demystifying and realizing that I think a lot of religious leaders actually write a kind of poetry when they create liturgy, but they don't think
hmm
of it as poetry. And I wonder
yeah,
too if maybe we need to name poetic forms that people don't realize they're doing in order to also help demystify it.
that could be. I'll add that to I'll add that to my list. Trying to manage. I started managing my attention by keeping a list in my digital binder of cool ideas. I'm like, oh, that would be great. I'm like, okay, we'll go put it over here.
Yes.
I know where it is, and I'll come back for it later. Yeah, I have one of the profs at Garrett was teaching my PhD research methods class, and he was like, there's this whole huge literature in hymnology. And I'm like, that's true. I have not remotely started to touch that. And there's probably some really cool things that are happening in there. And
Is that
yeah,
Ron Anderson?
that would be Ron Anderson.
Yeah, we taught together at CTS, Christian Theological, for 6 years and wrote a book together. So it
Oh,
sounded so
very
much like
nice.
him. But he's
Ron is
right.
people don't know that Ron is so funny. Like,
Oh,
Oh, golly. He
no,
is so dry.
he
He's,
is.
you,
People
but
don't know.
you should see him play air organ when he's had a few drinks.
I
oh, I can
want to see
imagine.
this so bad.
Yes. Quick, Jen, next time I'm up there, we're going to take Ron out and we're going to get him
Oh,
drunk and then we'll
Get
air
him to,
organ.
air organ. Feet
I
and
absolutely.
all.
seriously,
Can't you just see it? Just
I
like
have a list of the
stops.
most Ron Anderson things from having worked with him now for like over 10 years.
Uh,
And so I have to let you guys know, Garrett, of course, is they've sold their buildings and they're moving to a different part of Northwestern's campus. It's not happening yet. It'll be happening next year.
Yeah.
But we had an employee meeting, and I don't think Ron would be upset if I shared this. There's on campus, of course, we have two organs. We have a large organ in the chapel, and then we have a small organ in this little tiny chapel called House Chapel. And
Oh, is
when
that what it's
it's all
called?
brought up, pardon?
Is that what it's called? I have been wondering about that for these past 3 years. Okay.
Yes,
Anyway.
House Chapel. We have this meeting and everybody is just learning about this. It's just kind of this thing. It's an all-employee meeting. Everybody's just learning. Ron raises his hand, and of all of the things, that people have questions about, Ron's first thing out of his mouth, I'm sure you can imagine, is what's going to happen to the organs?
absolutely.
And I was
Absolutely.
just like, yes, thank you, Ron. this is somebody needs to ask, and Ron is the one who's going to ask. And it was in the fall of last year. And
Yeah.
I just kept imagining Ron like dressed like the Grinch, sneaking away from House Chapel with the
Yes.
organ, like going in and stealing the organ
He
and
could
sneaking
put
away.
it in the same room with the grand piano.
Right. Yeah,
'Cause
exactly.
that one's just a little organ. It could fit
It
in
could
a
fit. Yeah,
house.
it could fit.
in
I
his
just was
little,
like,
yeah, town room.
I want to, if I was a good cartoonist, I would draw that little
Yeah.
cartoon
And
because
he would
that's
think
what
it's
I do.
hilarious. He would think it's
Oh
hilarious, I
yeah.
think.
Oh yeah.
I actually I don't get to see him very often. I mean, we used to, again, his office was like almost directly across from mine, and we wrote a book together, and we both were oblates in the Benedictine tradition around the same time and all of that in different communities, but still. So, just a lot of cool memories there. But I saw him about a year ago. Um, because I was at the Lilly Endowment event for the Nurturing Children,
Yeah.
the two initiatives related to children. And he was at a conference that was for um, academic deans or personnel who are doing accreditation kind of stuff and all of that. Um, Unbeknownst, neither of us knew the other was in town, but he had a former student that he arranged to meet up with, and or that he met up with, and she mentioned that she was there for a children's thing, and he's like, "Oh, if Lily's doing a children's thing, Karen Marie has got to be in town." And I get this text, "You're in Indianapolis, right? Can we meet for drinks?"
Nice.
He's
Nice.
like, "I figured if Lily's doing kids, you must be in town." And we should meet up in our old stomping ground. So, we got to catch up a little bit and talked a lot about, we were both, my parents had recently, not so distantly, died. His father was declining. His mother had already died. We were talking a lot about being in that position of managing your parents, kinds of things. But yeah, I miss him a lot because he was probably my favorite person on faculty. At
Oh,
CTS. And then, he left and I left because they were freezing tenure and a host of other things
Oh.
and went on to better things. But
sure. Yeah.
that air organ and the so
Yeah.
one
I
of the ways
need
we
to see
coped
that
with that, one of the
so
ways we coped
badly.
with the freezing tenure thing is that we would hold um, essentially all the untenured faculty would get together for social evenings where we loved our tenured members, but they couldn't quite understand just how traumatic this was for us. So we would gather, and one of them at my house, because I lived walking distance, was him doing air organ, and it was just hilarious.
This is the greatest thing I've heard.
I know. I know.
So
Full recital. I want a full recital.
yeah.
Yeah, I know. Gosh, I'm even now trying to think like, how can we make this happen? How can we sneak in some drinks?
Yeah. Just play some. Part of it was we would have music on, and other people are doing air guitar, but not Ron.
Not Ron. That's
No,
not his instrument. Why would he do air
no, why
guitar?
would
Yeah.
he? Of
He's
course.
not
And
a
he
folk. He's
and he
not a
can play
folk
by
worship guy.
Yeah,
ear, so
I'm sure.
he
Yeah,
can act like he's actually doing it.
it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I love it. Oh.
Yeah.
Kimball, I also just put up, not on your Padlet, but the group Padlet,
Oh, right.
that I teach for the school called the Global Center for Advanced Studies in Practical Theology.
Mhm.
And John Caputo, who was the
Oh.
Pope's teacher, is teaching on theopoetics for their Master's in Theology this September. And so
Sure.
I posted that on there because theopoetics has come up a couple of times here. And I'm like, if anybody's interested in a Master's of Theology, you could take theopoetics with John Caputo.
Which
So-
would be a thing. So one of my exams was in emancipatory pedagogy, hence
Mhm.
this. One of my exams was in theopoetics. And Khaled was my primary reader for that exam. And the works he's set for me is he's parceled it out into, I'm supposed to know the number, but I passed the exam, so I don't know.
Yep, you don't remember it now. That's
Yeah.
how it goes.
Yeah.
6 different flavors of theopoetics,
Mhm.
and that's one of the challenging things about the field is that they're related through the term, as much or more than any other aspect of how they operate theopoetically.
Yeah.
So they're concerned about God, and they're concerned about some kind of construction poesis, right?
Yeah.
But because there's a whole Whitehead school that isn't really quite what Caputo does, but it's
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, Caputo does radical theology, so
Yeah.
his view is a little bit different, but I don't know. They used to let people just take a la carte classes
Mm,
at first there, but I don't know that they still do that. So
that they're still doing that.
I'm just linking
Yeah.
the program, but
Right, and say go hang out with John Caputo. But that's yeah. So yeah, I read his most recent book, or second. Did he just have one new one out? Anyway, it's either the most recent or the one just before. What if something has come out in the last year? So interesting stuff, heavy duty going.
Yeah.
A lot more on the up in your head part and less in down in your feels part than some of the other theopoetic ways of doing things. So
yeah, he's definitely that guy.
yeah. Yep. But that's why the body of Christ has many members. So
Who taught your emancipatory class?
Deborah Juncker.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Uh,
Yep.
And
that
she's
makes
on my
a lot of sense.
committee. And yeah, she's
awesome.
great.
She's great. That was one of my favorite classes in all of seminary at Garrett. Reggie Blunt was my teacher, but
Oh, sure.
Also
Yeah.
good.
yeah, fantastic. And
he did my approaches, and I can't remember what the other word is, approaches and angles, or whatever we call the second half of the Christian education corpus at Garrett. So
yeah. I did my whole paper for emancipatory pedagogies is I had Bell Hooks be my mentor. And so she doesn't know me. I mean, she was my mentor in the sense that I read all of her works and kind of wrote my paper on all of her stuff. So that was I loved that class.
Oh yeah. It was a lot of that was one of the things I took my first term in the doctoral program, and as I look back, it's really a good thing that I was there, because I think it kept me anchored and a little more sane than I might have been otherwise, because it's more of a link to who I am in my research than pretty much anything else I was taking. So yeah, that was the interesting part about that 2 years. It's like, oh, I'm not actually doing much of anything about my area of research. And the further I got along, it's like, that's because the reason I'm researching it is because it's not here for people to take.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
yeah.
By the way, I could see her face and I can't remember her name. The tatted artwork above the mirror looks like a work by a woman I met at Duke at DITA this last fall. Who's a visual artist. But maybe hers is the painting of the work. I don't know. What's her name? So I was going to ask you if you tatted that yourself, or you got that from an artist, or the thing that says bread.
Me?
Yeah, you.
Oh, bread.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out who was in our session who was tatted, thinking about tattoos.
No, I'm sorry, crochet.
That was like an artwork. Oh, no. My grandma made that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
So my
that
grandma
gives way more nuance to the work. I think her name's Christine. I have she decided anyway, she was handing out note cards that she had put images of her work on the note cards, and she's just like, hey,
sure.
this is my artwork. And one of the note cards is roughly what you have your grandma's doily that's up there.
Well, and it's actually it's not tatted, it's crocheted. So my
Well,
grandma
isn't
crocheted
tatting?
lace.
I
It's a
thought tatting.
Tatting is knots. It's
Uh,
tying
yeah,
knots.
and so is
Yeah.
crochet
Hook.
usually is knots.
Yeah. Well, it
Well,
sort of
Oh,
crochet
okay.
it have to
with
be
a hook.
loops. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
Yeah.
loops into loops, kind of,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
using a hook instead of two needles. Yeah, which is
Okay.
also loops into loops.
Okay, that's the
Yeah.
difference.
But yeah, that's
Yeah.
my grandma crocheted lace. She
Mhm.
could use the really fine crochet hook and make. So that's what that is. I
It's
haven't looked at it
great.
in a while, but
Yeah,
yeah,
it's gorgeous.
yeah. Thank
I
you.
have a girlfriend who crochets. See, I now I know, and I am startled that I didn't know better. I thought that crochet and tat were true synonyms, not
A little bit
related art
different.
forms. Yeah. One of my besties is a sculptor who works in crochet.
Oh, cool.
So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Do they make projects that are meant to be, tell me what sculpting with crochet is like.
so she and I only get to see each other like for coffee when I'm home on break, except now that I moved home, I'll get to catch up. But for a while, she had she was working on a project where she decided she would render she had a rubric for it, but she would render flowers in honor of children who had died due to gun violence.
Hmm.
And I think the magnitude of the project just overall imploded the larger form of the work. But so she would figure out how to crochet botanically accurate flowers.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wonderful. That's amazing.
yeah, so that's the one that always comes to mind because it was, definitely 3D and had all this stuff going on, but she was definitely doing crochet
Yeah.
and yeah. But I don't, yeah. She's always got something going on. She had a machine knit lace period around the time my older girl was born, and so I have a gorgeous piece of my daughter Alex's baptismal gown was machine knit
wow.
lace. But what she did for hire when she was still working and when she was still working that had a paycheck was she was a programmer and working with chip design companies, doing some of their support for the tools that the designers use to figure out what chips to make. So she had done her undergrad in comp sci, and so, from programming back into machine knitting, and then she'd always been interested in textile stuff. So
Nice.
once
People are
she,
going to start popping
coming
back
back.
in the next minute.
Well, I've seen like some sculptors that they're able to like sculpt with clay and make it look like fabric or look like
Mhm.
material or chains or knitting or whatever. So I was wondering if that was what
Yeah, no, it's the other way around. It's actual
yeah.
thread
Yeah.
turning and wire. There's a lot of wire involved in
Sure,
getting
yeah.
it to, and starch.
Yeah. I imagine a lot of starch.
Okay. Uh, Kimball, we are back, right?
We are coming back together. Yeah.
Yep. And Karen Marie takes it from here.
Okay. So, Karen Marie, where are you? Did you say you were in Canada? I don't remember. Were you the person driving yesterday?
No, I'm actually in Virginia.
Oh,
I've been the person who's been crossing my fingers that the thunderstorms rolling through the area will not take my power as I try to lead. But I'm in rural Eastern Virginia.
Eastern Virginia. Yeah,
All
I'm in
right.
Maryland.
Okay.
We're closer than the others who are coming from Australia and all the other places.
Exactly. All right, welcome back. As we continue our reflection together, I am going to invite you to participate in a guided reflection that you can do in your head, or you can sketch on paper, or engage it in whatever way you want. But I encourage you to either close your eyes to kind of minimize the other visual influences around you, or mute your camera so that you can sort of be more inwardly focused as we engage in this. And then after we complete the guided reflection, I'll invite you to share if you are interested in communicating about what you experienced through the chat or aloud. This is a chance to imagine together. So um, close your eyes or mute your video and take a deep breath in and let it out. Take another deep breath in and let it out. Imagine that it is 2035 and you have been asked to teach a religious education class. Your host says that you can decide on the specific topic and format of the session. Where do you see yourself teaching? Who do you imagine participating in your class? What do you imagine will be your topic? How do you begin the session? What else do you do during the session? Imagine yourself wrapping up the session. Afterward, a participant asks to talk with you about their experience. What do you imagine that they say? As you prepare to leave your imaginings, take a deep breath in and let it out. Slowly open your eyes and rejoin the plenary group. And as your attention moves back into the plenary space, if you're willing, please share some of what you imagined, either aloud or in the chat. Yes, Thelma.
So I drew something. I don't know if it will be visible or not. No, it's not visible. Okay, so what I've drawn is a banyan tree. In my father's village, I've seen in Indian villages, they have this in the center of the village, there is a huge banyan tree and a platform is constructed all around it. And the villagers sit down in the evenings after work and discuss their problems, or, they do things together. And I am like thinking in 2035, that's where I'd like to be. Not as a savior, we already have one savior, not as a savior, but perhaps as a facilitator. So I'm thinking about a local place where people come together and they bring their problems. So we start with songs. And what I believe is that I come from a very charismatic, the last, a few years, 2 decades ago, I was in a very charismatic church where there used to be a lot of singing and dancing. And so I know how it affects our emotions and our bodies. And when the message is then given, it goes deep inside, and then you are trained, you're formed as the pastor there wants you to be. But here, for people to connect with each other, and hold hands and come together, and then to sit and take up the problems of the local area and see how they can resolve the problem, but also connecting it to the religious scripture, probably from different religious backgrounds, and to talk it out and resolve the problem, or sort out how to resolve the problem. And we learn from each other and we take help from each other. So that's mutuality is there. And I'm thinking of ending with one of the group members thanking God for the opportunity given in whatever way they want to lead us in. And the participants' feedback probably would be about how their problem was resolved in their session. And they hope for very good results. That's the concept. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your imagining. Yeah. You have a note in the chat. I imagined I would like to be somewhere in Africa to listen and learn from each other the journey through life. Yin.
I imagine I am in the religious education class in a parish in Vietnam with the Vietnamese young people, teenager. And I will, the topic of this class is God is love. And the beginning activities, I will ask them to like drawing their experience about love by drawing a picture. And then after that, we can read the Psalm about love. For example, Psalm 106, God loves and endures forever. And then after reading those Psalms, I can invite them to create their own verses. According to the, following that Psalm, and they create their own verses for the Psalms. And then we may end with sharing the verses together.
Thank you, Yin. In the chat, we have, I imagine myself instructing an online undergraduate course on theology and disability. I introduced the course with a personal video. I picture myself at my computer discussing topics with others on a forum. And the parenthetical statement, I realize this is not terribly imaginative, but I think it is perhaps imaginative to the rest of us. In fact, someone else noted this, Paul, you imagined it. So it's very imaginative. May your imagined future come into being for you. Chana, I'm sorry if I mispronounced. Please tell us.
Thank you,
Yeah.
China. Thank you.
China, all right.
So what I see is being in a beach with wind and sun beating on our bodies collectively. And I imagine that this group would be the group of the nuns and the duns, or the emerging church. And coming together for the possibility of celebration and to experience the earth and the world. And my topic would be a visionary Ubuntu pedagogy, transformation through imagination and possibility. And so as we're in the elements, we see the ocean. I would invite people to take off their shoes if they feel so inclined. There would be some palm trees if they want to touch the leaves, just to look at creation and to see the awe and the possibilities of what is in the world and things to be grateful for. And the God of your understanding, if that is your language, or connecting to that which is meaningful for you. And then to work with getting into our bodies, to breathe, to acknowledge those who have gone before us, that have contributed to our lives and our ancestors in some way, centering ourselves. Then I would ask those who were gathered to introduce themselves and to state what do they bring into the space? What are they feeling? How would they like us to experience them in their totality, in their hurt, in their curiosity, in their mundaneness? Whatever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, feel free to share. And then I would ask them to experience just being. If anything were possible, what would you want to be? And then as we return, we come back into a circle in hopes that it won't be like the banking system. I won't be the disseminator. We will be collectively engaged and invested in that moment, in that synergy. So we return back in the circle on the sand, and we can sink into the sand, or if people want to stand up, they may. And then the participants may say something collectively, maybe in the order of, I dare to free my soul. I want to experience my spirit in the world. And I'm thinking that someone might come and say, I know you never talked about Jesus. I know you didn't even talk about God. But really, if church was like this, maybe I would have stayed. And I'll say, well, that's a possibility too. Ashe and amen.
Thank you, China. I think we have time for one more person to share if you would like to tell us about your imaginings.
Let me just share this. I may have mentioned it in passing. I've been reflecting a lot, and I put out this new book, Reclaiming Traditions of Igbo Education and the Legacy of the Holy Ghost Missionaries. And central to my argument in the book, and as I experience my practice right now, is that we can make a distinction between church missionary education, which is a colonial type of education that use every subject, including the Bible, to propagate European influences and European culture and church influences. We need to give up on that and migrate to a Christian religious education that we find in the stories in the New Testament. It's a Christian religious education of the Gospels. They may not be perfect, but to be in that space is what I am passionate about, that we need to migrate from the restrictive, colonial, disempowering education that we have inherited from our ancestors, whether Black or white, to this emancipatory Christian religious education of the gospel. That is the project I cannot wait to see take off.
Thank you. And I give thanks for all the imaginings that we have had in this time, the imaginings that we've had before we gathered here, the imaginings that will continue into the future for each of us and for us as a community of religious educators in the REA. We have tried to look in various directions through the plenaries to acknowledge the past gifts and the ways in which they are not always gifts that we want to hold, as well as gifts that we want to celebrate, to explore the many different challenges that we encounter and the ones that come closest to us and our contexts that need to be wrestled and reckoned with. And in the midst of all of that, to be able to imagine what could be and to see how our work already leans into those imaginings. So hold that vision with you as we wrap up this annual meeting. Carry it close so that on those days when it feels like the challenges or the problematic messiness of the past are getting in the way, you still have something that gives you hope. Thank you all, and we'll call it an end to the third plenary. Take care.